the morning sun, I'll be sitting when the evening comes, watching the ships roll in, then I'll watch them roll away again. Yeah, I'm sitting on the dock of the bay, watching the tide roll away. Just sitting on the dock of the bay, wasting time. I left my
Maritime Matters is brought to you live by Bahamas Maritime Connection.
What is maritime?
Maritime, simply put, relates to navigation or commerce on the high seas.
Some say money makes the world go round. I say ships move the money that make the world move.
Who navigates those large international ships?
How often are international ships required to be surveyed and inspected?
Maritime also protects our seas and borders by way of our local Bahamas Defense
It is
Force.
very sad to say that out of 1,500 plus ships that are registered under the Bahamian flag, only a very small amount of Bahamians are employed.
Maritime Matters.
And pleasant good evening to you, our valued listening audience. Welcome one. Welcome all. Welcome to Maritime Matters. I am your host, Captain Glenn Bain. We're coming to you live via Love 97 FM. This is Tuesday, the 3rd of December, 2024. And if it's a Tuesday, you know the deal. It's Maritime Tick, 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 tick. Matters. We encourage that if you're driving and tuned in with us, please do so cautiously and ensure to take your time in getting wherever it is you are trying to get safely. As the saying goes, drive to arrive alive. Our sponsors for tonight's show are 101 Pharmacy and of course also Island Care Pharmacy. For all your medication needs, check out my good little cousin Tia McBride and a lovely team at 101 Pharmacy in Nassau and of course Island Care Pharmacy at Freeport. Fill the prescription at the store or send your refills via the online site 1on1pharmacy.com. That's all one word, lowercase, 1on1pharmacy.com. The three locations are East Street South. You know the deal. When you go in, you gotta tell Joy hi. Tell Joy Maritime Matters, Captain Bain, say hello, because she run things up and down. Charles Sanders Highway, and of course, Explorers Way in downtown Freeport. Now that's the one where my big cousin Steph hangs out. Boy, Steph just come off that cruise. She got me and all. And I see her this weekend. She was just glowing. Yes, I was in Freeport. Just got back. Boy, we got a little bit to say about Freeport today as well. So when you see Steph, give her a kiss and tell her, your little cuz, Glenn, say give you a kiss, whether you like it or not. That's what I'm talking about. We are secondly sponsored by Bahamas Maritime Connection Limited. At BMC, we provide a full slate of ISPS maritime security services. Our wonderful producer for the night, you know the guy, Mr. Craig Gibson, the man on the controls, the man with the power, the man of the hour, you name it, he got it going on. Good night, Annie Mae. My Auntie May. Boy, look here, Annie Mae lost a phone. Somebody hacked, and how you gonna hack a 91-year-old woman phone? Hack Annie Mae phone, man. She had to go wait a couple days to get that reorganized, but she back online now. My girl back online. So I say, good evening, Annie Mae. You know, that's my good old Annie Mae up there in Freeport, boy. 91 years and going strong, people. And I, you know, whenever you're calling, you could tell her hello, because she just love to hear it. You're listening to Maritime Matters. On this show, we talk maritime. Maritime Matters is weekly at 17:05. That's 5:05 p.m. every Tuesday here on Love 97 FM. The purpose of our show is to highlight persons that made significant contributions to maritime in the Bahamas and to sensitize Bahamians of opportunities in the maritime sector. We also cover current maritime issues from domestic and international maritime fields. We got a load of that for you tonight. The phone number to call us if you want in on this discussion is 326-82-5555. 2255. I repeat, if you want to be a part of our discussion, and we encourage you. Like how people say, oh, Glenn, you like to talk, you don't listen. No. We want to hear you talk. But we can't hear you unless you call, eh? So the number to call again, 326-8255. If you wish to hear a replay of this show or any of our previous shows, simply hit us up at any time via our YouTube page. That's Maritime Matters Bahamas. Just go to YouTube on your electronic device and type into the search box Maritime Matters Bahamas, and you will see all the boards lit up. You will see all the shows, the current show, and we kind of keep it current. So you will see the most recent ones first, eh? But check us out on YouTube, our YouTube page, Maritime Matters Bahamas. So let's talk maritime. Hello. Tonight, we have a litany of topics to bring alive. As you may very well be aware, there's a lot going on. Not only with our officials and our authorities, because you know how you all so nosy, you all like to talk, them kind of things. But in maritime, topics we aim to engage tonight are as follows. We want to talk about total quality management. That's the TQM system. Because in maritime, all ships and companies that manage those ships are required to have a TQM system in place. We got a whole code called ISM code, International Safety Management Code, that is made up specifically to ensure that the documentation is in place, the audits are in place, the procedures manuals in place, and you name it. But ships, easy, especially passenger ships. So we're going to talk about total quality management from the perspective of the Bahamas. You know, in the mid-90s, all the senior officials in government, because in 94 I became a senior government official. I was sent from the Defense Force on secondment, to the Port Department to eventually take over. In a matter of months it happened as the Deputy Port Controller. And once that happened, I became a senior government official. I think I was the youngest senior government official in government at the time. And so a couple years after I went to the port in 94, and around 96, 97, because you remember now, the FNM won the election in 92. And when the FNM won that election in 92, the Prime Minister at the time, former Prime Minister Hubert Ingram, he was implementing a whole heap of improvements, changes in the entire system. And nobody got to ask how come they win in, was it 1997? Everybody was so impressed. There was no way the FNM could have lost in 1997 because that first term was so impacting that the country just like breathed a sigh of relief. Well, anyway, I into politics, as you know. I just vote. I'm a swing voter. I can't even trust myself. I could change my mind when I get in the booth. So don't try to label me because you're going to lose. You ain't know how I can vote. I don't even know how I can vote. But the government at that time implemented for all senior government officials. They have to attend a 6 month, and this was in 6 straight months. There's a couple days out every week for like a couple hours. But you had to do this total quality management training. And the good gentleman that brought that on, he delivered that training in fine style, and I was so impressed, was Roosevelt Finlayson. You may not know Roosevelt. Most of us know Spence Finlayson. Most of us know Hawk Finlayson. But Roosevelt is the brother of Spence and Hawk. And may God bless the soul of Hawk Finlayson. Continue to bless his soul. And Roosevelt was bringing to the entire public service, by way of top level, you had permanent secretaries, deputy permanent secretaries, heads of departments, deputy heads of departments, and the list goes on, right? That were doing this training of total quality management to the public service. And I tell you, that course really, it got my head a little whopped because I didn't know how important management was. Not especially total quality or quality management, or as we call it today, just quality. You have quality in your system. And so Brother Roosevelt told us that, it's a bottom-up system. It's that how your people at the bottom work determines the quality of your organization, especially the people who come in contact with your customers, right? Because the first impression is a lasting one, and the people who they tangle with, usually at the bottom, in the back office normally have the higher end people, but at the lowest level, they need to buy in to understand what this quality is all about. You need to have written procedures so that if one person failed to come to work, somebody else could just go there, read the procedures, and carry out that duty, right? And I've never seen anything like it, not even in the defense force. So to me, I was so amazed. But anyway, that went on. I went, the port controller, Mr. Harvey Sweeting at the time, he went 1 year, and the following year, I would have gone as the deputy port controller. And it was an eye-opening experience. And I can tell you that the only thing that was missing from that 6-month training was later on or after the training, there was no follow-up to ensure that management bought into it and applied it to their area of work. We'll talk about that some more, right? And I would have had, when I went back to the port department, an opportunity to do some things. But did I do it? I don't think so. Why I didn't do it? We can talk about that later. Revenue sectors, because after that happened, a year or two later, the government at the time, the F&M government, the Ingram administration, brought in some experts to go around to all the revenue sectors to do a review, to check those revenue sectors out, to see if any loopholes, any funding that's supposed to be collected was falling through the cracks or wasn't being sought after. And man, let me tell you something, those people knocked me off my shoes, or should I say off my feet, when they came with certain questions that got me basically dumbfounded, because I couldn't think of some of these things, and I tried to figure out, man, they don't even wait and they could pick this up. But anyway, that was an introduction for me. Again, we'll talk about that later. But let's stick with the total quality management maritime sector in the Bahamas. What do we project? Well, not only project, what is happening in our Bahamas Maritime Authority operations? Do they have a quality management system in place where they have procedures for issuing licenses, procedures for dealing with classification societies, procedure for reviewing annual inspections for all the ships, procedures? I dare say no. I remember when I was at the BMA, there was this gentleman, his name was some Van der Shans. He was brought into the London technical team for the purpose of implementing, because he was an expert in quality management. And he actually did his part. Van der Shan actually got a procedures manual together that was written, in detail. But up until the time I left, it was never implemented. Do they have a quality system going on now? I can't say. But I wouldn't be surprised if they don't. And if they do, please, somebody call me and let me know. I would love to hear that they have a quality management system throughout the BMA, where they're being audited on a monthly basis, internally and independently on an annual basis. And they have procedures that are being carried out and all the rest of that good stuff. I don't believe it's happening, but let me know, right? Because I know it's not happening in the port department. And I could say that based on what I know, right? Because I still have affiliation in dealing with the port department in certain matters, and I talk to people all the time, and then you go and then you could see what's going on. But again, we need that in place for places like Porter's Key, The procedures manual, and we'll talk about the details. I don't want to go into too much right now before the break, right? But after the break, we go into the details of the stuff. Porter's Key, the way they issue their licenses, the institution that train people for licenses to be issued, the fact that they need to see that these people know how to handle a vessel and all that. And are those things documented? Mind you, we know it's supposed to happen. But are they documented? Do they have procedures in ensuring that these things are there? Registering vessels, inspections, carrying out inspections before they can give a vessel the registration. Are these things happening? I don't think so, right? I know the things are happening, but are they happening based on a quality management system? I don't think so, because there's no requirement under the law that the Port Department have a quality management system for doing these things. It's something that, well, again, the Ingham administration back in the day saw it necessary for the entire public service. But I don't think one single government entity actually implemented it. And maybe I need to talk to Rusi. Whenever I see him, I'll ask him, say, Roosevelt, back in the day when you put on all that training, did anybody ever implement any of that? Because it'll be very interesting to know. And then we got training institutions that train people for the A and B class license. We got training people that train people to serve on international ship. We got training institutions that in this country that are responsible for assisting the Port Department and the BMA with preparing people to be licensed, right? Are those training institutions being operated under a quality management system? The way they do their training, is everything documented? Is everything audited? And they're all supposed to be audited, I can tell you that. And that's one of the things the BMA wanted to get away from. That's why they didn't want to do issuance. Anyway, we talk about that later. Boy, look, these things be getting on the case. I happen to know a lot of things that should be done wasn't done. And you can't blame me if I talk in it, because I ain't scared. I never scared to talk something that I know should have happened and didn't happen. And they ain't never too late to make sure it happened, eh? And that's basically how we can deal with the total quality management approach in government, and more specifically in the maritime sector of government, right? The Port Department, the BMA, the training institution, well, that ain't government, but they come under the Port Department and the BMA, so we can rope them in too, right? We want to talk today about some renewable energy in the Bahamas. We started to really dig into this last week. We talk about the power grid and why is it that if you want to put in the system now, you basically got to do that off the grid, because the agencies that deal with power supply in New Providence and in Grand Bahama, they're not giving us the option to tie into the grid. They're not letting us do the grid tie thing, whereby when we're making during the sunlight more energy than our house need, that excess is going to the grid. And in the nighttime, when the sun is not out and we're not making energy, we could take back from the grid what we need to keep our house going, right? And that's really the most important thing about us being tied to the grid, is if we have that option to do so, we can buy a bunch of solar panels, tie them in with an inverter, a good inverter, and we wouldn't need no batteries to store nothing. And the batteries are the most expensive part. So if the energy systems, and I would like somebody from BPL and Grand Bahama Power Company or wherever, any electrician, to call in and let us know why we don't have the option to grid tie. Why we got to stay off the grid if we want to bring in solar. And not only we got to stay off the grid, even if you want to stay off the grid, do you know that based on law, you need to get authorization from ERCOT to provide power for yourself, even if you're off the grid? I don't think they can tell you no, but I just saying this is what the law requires. Where is the incentive for the Bahamas to utilize solar energy to keep this nation going? because we know we got to get away from the fossil fuel by a certain time. But we got more sun than most countries in the world, but yet we don't see the incentive from our government agencies or quasi-government agencies to want to move to solar. A lot of us doing it now, but we need more incentive. Exuma is set out to become over 80% solarized. I think they start next year. So, if Exuma could become over 80% solarized, why can't New Providence and Grand Bahama become 90% solarized? We just need more solar. But if we could tie onto the grid, if we could grid tie, the government even don't have to worry but a lot of solar panels and inverters. Because we could supply ourselves and even feed back to the grid so that we helping the government to give people who don't have the panels and inverter set up to get some of what the government buying back from us at a cheap rate and still charging them more for it. But the energy cost will be severely reduced down to about 25% of what we pay now. And the whole country wins. Well, except a couple people who you and I know. Those couple people who just make big bucks of importing the fossil fuel, including the government. Because the government taxed that heavily. But if we all now go to solar, the government ain't got nothing to tax, and government get that revenue, the government's getting nigga low. And I think that's part of the reason why the incentive is not being pushed out there. But if we look for the greater good, and the number to call again, 326-8255, please help me out. If we look to the greater good, BPL and Grand Bahama Power GBPC, Grand Bahama Power Company, should be incentivizing us to use our rooftops for solar panels so that they don't have to put big, huge, humongous solar farms just to supply the amount of power needed to the grid. They can use our rooftops. They're already in place. And we want them. Yeah, well, I mean, we can use our own rooftop. So if something go wrong with my setup and my solar panels, I ain't gonna have to buy a new solar panel. That wouldn't even be a cost to them. Because if I'm not feeding to the grid, I ain't getting no money from them. Right? And when my meter go backwards and I feed to the grid, they buying it for cheap and selling it to someone else from us. So they still making money. Plus, and the big plus, is when they reduce the amount of carbon being emitted into the environment because of all that fossil fuel they're now using, whether it be natural gas, whether it be bunker C, whether it be diesel. I couldn't care what kind, because all those fuel sources are emitting carbon. So if they're no longer emitting that carbon because they put in some solar farms and they're using our rooftops, and the whole island is now being governed by solar, which is easy to do in this country. We got a gift, we got the sun. Then everybody will win. Then they could go to United Nations and say, our country, the Bahamas, used to give off 200 tons of carbon per month because of our utility services utilizing bunker C or whatever kind of fuel that they were using, even if now they're using natural gas, whatever. So the amount of money, the amount of carbon that we no longer emitting, the mitigation or the reduction of carbon we will receive from the United Nations. Certain amount of money per ton of carbon that we no longer putting in there. So we will be getting carbon credits just for converting our country from fossil fuel to solar. And somebody please call me, tell me why we ain't doing that. Why aren't we incentivizing our citizens from the perspective of the energy providers to tie into our grid and cause electricity in this country to collapse so that everybody can win? The government will lose a couple dollars, but again, the government on the backside will be getting money from the United Nations, because the United Nations got a fund of over $3.7 trillion that they can pay in credits to countries that have mitigated the amount of carbon they're putting in the environment. Yes, we got big carbon sinks with all of our seagrass meadows and mangroves and that type of thing. But those things are not, we are not doing anything to mitigate. They are helping, and even after the entire world have converted to either solar, wind farms, or what the next thing is? Nuclear. Because nuclear today is like 10% of the world energy. When the whole world have done that by 2050, our carbon sinks will continue to be taking carbon out of the environment. So unless we can find a way to say that we add more seagrass meadows that mitigated the amount of carbon in the environment prior to this time, we might as well leave that alone. You know, there ain't no money for us from that carbon sinks. And I ain't giving nobody say. And if anybody disbelieve or have a different view on that, please, 326-8255. Call and let us know. Because I would like to be educated on that if I have it wrong. Now, based on all of my research, that's what it tells me. So we want to really talk about renewable energy, not only in the Bahamas, not only in the Gulf, also in shipping. We got a lot going on where ships are now moving to putting rotor sails. These sails that they can roll out if the wind is behind them to improve their speed without pumping and pushing down the throttle, say. We got companies like Maersk. They now making ships that can burn methanol just so they don't be putting carbon in the environment. So they have dual engine ships. But first of all, they could burn, they're burning, this is new builds now, but even some of the ships that exist now, they're converting to dual fuel options. The first one being, like we're trying to do in the Bahamas, and I don't know why, natural gas, because, you know, the methanol and ammonia and all the rest of that good stuff are not ready in the volume of supplies necessary for ships to actually use them as bunkers. But they're getting there. And a lot of arrangements in the world are now being made for methanol supply, ammonia supply, along certain routes. Particularly between like Norway right now, Germany, Singapore, and now they're going to tie in China. So along those routes, they got barges that could supply them. They got ports that are storing these things now. And eventually the whole world will have those things. But we don't have to worry about that, right? Well, we ain't really, unless we have a ship, we ain't got to worry about that. But in this country, we got solar. Once we could tie into the grid, we don't have to buy batteries. And come on, man, everybody wins. You can still get your batteries so that if you get a hurricane or something coming on, your batteries can hold you for how long you want to roll with. That's how much batteries you buy. Some people just like to be comfortable. You can buy batteries as a source of backup generator. We don't know long with them backup generators that they have for sale that go on diesel and gas and some of them go with propane. Those are going to be a thing of the past. Because if you use them and you're caught using them, you'll be fined. Because that means you're now putting fossil fuel back in there after 2050. So these are some of the things you're going to be discussing after the break in further detail. Local electric vehicle battle. You know, we got these EVs, electric vehicles, starting to come in more abundance in our country. But in Europe, man, we talked last week about what London doing. If you don't get an EV after 2035, you can't even come on the road in London. You've got to be driving an EV. And if you get an EV now, you pay less to enter the London busy zone and all the rest of that good stuff. So EVs are on the way. EVs, after 2035, they're not going to be allowed to even have what we call internal combustion engine vehicles on the road. Right? You have to have an EV. They can find ways so your EV could charge overnight right at your house. I mean, they're doing it now. Right? They can have charging stations at restaurants, charging stations in parking lots. So you ain't gonna need no more gas stations, eh? It's a lot gonna change in this battle for energy source. And right here in our country, we got two companies now providing EVs. And they're having a battle because one of them saying, you know, that company charging so much money, we ain't need any charge all that. And then one saying, boy, look here, we got this on lock. You can't get none of these kind of cars. And I think they're talking about the what they call it, BYDs or the China. Build your dream EV, electronic vehicles. Excuse me. They're the largest and most popular EVs in the world right now, especially in Europe and places where they coming in a bunch, trying to making them, kicking them out like mad. So we got a company saying we have the what you call the thing when you go in an agreement that you any of them coming in, like if you was a dealer for Toyota and nobody else could bring it to well, they can't bring it in brand new. But based on what I read, this other company said, man, we ain't bringing them in brand new. We're bringing them in good condition, probably a year old, 2, 3, 4, 5, how much ever. But the rates are far better. So, of course, the other ones are saying, you can't go to them because they can't give you no guarantee. All kind of thing going on. Anyway, we can get into that if we could get to that in the next lap, right? I don't know if we can get that far, but we can try. And then, of course, we can't leave out the Houthis. The Houthis continue to frustrate operations in the Suez Canal, the Red Sea, the Gulf of Aden, and then that whole strip of area where vessels got to go to take shortcut from the Indian Ocean to the Mediterranean Sea. Eh? Otherwise, they go all the way around Africa and take an additional 2 weeks just to get to the next end of the Mediterranean Sea. So the Houthis realize that, boy, look here, we making an impact now where we could start charging ships to allow them to pass. Blackmail them. That ain't happening though. Because when it comes to that, now you gotta remember the Houthis are doing what they're doing because Israel had all the pressure on Gaza and the Palestinians. But that is starting to ease off now. The question is, will the Houthis ease off when that stops? Or will they try and commercialize what they're doing? But I can tell you one thing. I think the world understands why they're doing what they're doing, and the world is not really coming down on them like a ton of bricks. But if they try, in my opinion now, to blackmail ships and that conflict between Israel and the Palestinians is done with, they will find out that boots will be on the ground weeding them out. and they will be on the run. That's my view. But recently they were shooting at some U.S. destroyers, 2 U.S. destroyers that were trying to escort 1 or 2 U.S. ships through that area. And of course, they've been sending a barrage of ballistic missiles, a barrage of drone ships, drone aircraft, just to try and get some attention in that area. That's what the Houthis is doing. So as you might imagine, with all this information we want to talk about, we are loaded and we are heavily laden with information surrounding all of these topics. We're talking maritime, people. You are listening to Maritime Matters. At this point, we move to our first break, and when we return, we will engage tonight's maritime discussions. Listen, people, you do not want to miss this one. Thank you very much.
At Bahamas Maritime Connection Limited, we offer first-class maritime security services throughout the Bahamas and the wider Caribbean. As experts in maritime security, we specialize in production of ISPS assessments and plans, verification audits, certified familiarization training, and port security consultancy, just to name a few. Our services also include provision of a security force to maintain all required ISPS facility security compliance. For all your maritime security needs, visit us today in Nassau at our East Street South location or in Freeport in the Kipling Building. Call us at 392-3515 or follow us on all social media platforms. Bahamas Maritime Connection, your leader in maritime security. Let's help you make the connection. At One-on-One Pharmacy, our friendly staff is ready to serve you. Visit us today for all your prescription and over-the-counter needs at our East Street South or Charles Saunders Highway locations. We're open Monday through Saturday from 8 a.m. to 8 p.m. and from 9 to 4 on Sundays. In a rush? Send your refill scripts online at oneononepharmacy.com or ask about our convenient pickup service. One-on-One Pharmacy, providing personal health care with people at heart.
We know what you want, and you know where to find it. Right here on Love 97 FM.
Sitting in the morning sun, I'll be sitting when the evening comes.
Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to Maritime Matters. I am your host, Captain Glenn Bain, and we're about to have ourselves some good time tonight because we are covering some topics that are so topical that I know we're about to be bombarded with calls. The number to call if you want to run this conversation tonight is 326-8255. That's 326-8255. So we're sponsored tonight by Bahamas Maritime Connection, as you heard, and also One-on-One Pharmacy and Island Care Pharmacy. Our producer for the night, the one and only, the famous, infamous Mr. Craig Gibson. And as we move to our number one topic, total quality management. You know, I want to say that in the 90s, around 96, 97, 98-ish, the entire government system underwent a total quality management training for all senior government officials. And then some of them may have been on vacation and didn't get to do it or whatever the case may be. But from the permanent secretaries down to deputy permanent secretaries, first assistant secretaries, head of departments, deputy head of departments, undersecretary, you name it. A litany of government directors, I'll call them. People who were making directions in government, underwent a 6-month training that was put on by one Mr. Roosevelt Finlayson. Very impressive training over a 6-month period, a couple times a week, for like a couple hours during that. I think that when we went for the whole day when we went, something like that. But it was very impacting. I happened to do the training because I had just recently become a senior government official. I was a little young, but I was a senior government official, eh? And I did that training, and that really opened my eye to a lot. And the problem with that is we had no management follow-up. There was no follow-up to say, when you get back to your department or your ministry, you would implement some of this by causing that section to document the procedures and identifying people to do quarterly audits in that system and calling in an independent auditor to do what you call external audits at least once a year. So it would force that organization to improve whatever it is they're doing. So, in my opinion, Rusi should have been, Mr. Roosevelt Finlayson should have been further contracted to go around to those departments and ministries once he get through with all that 2 or 3 years of training and write quality manuals, procedures manuals for the various tasks that had to be done in that ministry and assist with the implementation to ensure that training initiative didn't just fritter away. Because I'm sure that when the then Prime Minister Hubert Ingram went to the extent to have all these people, these senior people in that room to train over a 6-month period, the intentions could not have been for them to go back to the workplace and not utilize some of that quality injection into their system. But I was wrong. I was wrong because that's what happened. I went back to the port department and I realized that I was saying I could do some of this stuff. But I catch myself and say, but Mr. Sweeten gone, Harvey Sweeten gone a year ahead of me and he ain't put nothing in place. So I ain't gonna be brazen enough to go behind him and say, well, Harvey, because, you know, Harvey and I were very close. We were personal friends as well as he was my boss. I could have talked to him. I could say, Harvey, what we can do with this thing, man? I just figure, if he saying nothing, I say nothing. Boy, look here. All of us used to be very, very busy. So it was very difficult to do something like that. And that's the reason why I'm saying that Brother Rusi should have been further contracted to go around. And the fact that Harvey and I had done the training, we would have been more than happy to lend assistance to him making up those procedure manuals, to him implementing and putting in place and ensuring that the staff is working based on those procedure manuals. And this could have happened government-wide because in 1997, the FNM won again. So there's no reason why there should not be some continuity in following up what was already done. But again, it didn't happen. And also around that time, when I figured we should have been implementing this thing, I already make up my mind that, you know, it's time for me to move on because the government just wasn't paying me enough. I needed more money. My children started to grow up and bills started to get real and I just needed to make more money. So my thing was I can qualify myself to get out of here and make more money. And that's what I did. And I was able to double my salary. So I move on, right? I move on and went with Intamago Shipping where I was a ship manager and started to drive a ship. Now, Intamago Shipping, around that time, all companies that managing ships had to implement the ISM code. That's the International Safety Management Code. And this ISM code required that you have a procedures manual for every ship you're managing. You have a procedures manual for everything you do in your office pertaining to that ship. And you had to get certified under quality management. The ship needed an international ship safety certificate. And the port facility needed a document of compliance. So I didn't get away from it. And I was so happy I did it, because it was so easy for me now to adopt what was necessary to apply quality procedures to the two ships we were managing, and the procedures, manuals, and everything in the office. But of course, they got a gentleman out of Canada who was expert in that area to come down and write all the manuals and all that. But for me to follow them through wasn't no big deal no more, because Rusi already had me all prepared for that. And this is why I say that could have happened in government, right? So nothing really happened in the light of the quality measures in the port department, or may I say in any other government entity, right? But what did happen prior to me leaving the port department was the revenue sector's review. What the government did back then, after all this training was done, is they brought in a task force from somewhere with a couple foreigners and some local Bahamians to all revenue collecting sectors of government. And they came around, and this is where, those agencies, all the revenue generating agencies, reviewed to ensure revenues that they were supposed to be collecting were sought after. And I got a wake-up call when the task force placed me under interview. They called me in. They said, Mr. Bain, how can you assure that the slip drawn up by your tugboats when they wake a cruise ship reaches your accounts department? In other words, every time, we were in charge of the 2 or 3 tugboats that we had, and every time they wake a cruise ship, we're supposed to charge the agent for that work from our accounts department, and they would pay for the hours or whatever. Because we had fixed rates per hour and all the rest of that. So what they asked me is, suppose a cruise ship suppose one of your tugboats wake a cruise ship, but they don't send the slip to accounts. How governing that slip don't slip through the cracks? And I was like, I don't know. And I was dumbfounded. I couldn't find, I was puzzled. I was like, boy, these people are onto something. Because, I know at the time, we had some captains that they were not super responsive. I don't want to use the term slack. Boy, but some of them was a little slack, right? And that slip could have fallen, especially if they had vacation next day, because now I remember sometimes they were in these tugboats in the night. And if their vacation started the next day, you think they can come to wake to carry that slip to accounts? Oh boy, that slip could sit right there until they come back to wake 2 weeks later. And if they find it or if they remember it, they could carry it to accounts. So what we had to do, I say, Cap, why don't you let's find a way, they say any other entity in the port department does have any oversight or affiliation when a tugboat or when a cruise ship coming in a tugboat. I said, well, we got to have a control upstairs. They would give the ship permission to come in, and they would already know what ships use tugboats and whatnot. They say, yeah, okay, so what we can do is, let's get harbor control. Every time a ship comes in that uses tugs, and then, from harbor control tower, they can look down and see all this operation going on. They know when the tugs move, because the tugs have to get permission to leave the dock to go and wake the cruise ships. So they say every time they give the tug permission to move, let them draw up a slip from harbor control and send that to accounts the very next morning. And accounts will have that slip. And they're only waiting on the captain now to bring the tugboat slip that they'll staple to that. And if they don't get the tugboat slip, they call the tugboat captain and say, well, your boy, we waiting on a slip. We got bill these agents. Where's the slip from the job that was done 2 days ago? So we now know that we have a checking system that can assist in ensuring that every time those tugboats move to wake, the government gets the money and not just relying on the tugboat captain to bring that slip to accounts. Because if the club captain don't carry that slip to accounts, the account saying, no, accounts they don't know when the boats move. So that was adopted. And that was my first real insight as to how you could clog up loose ends when it comes to revenue collection in an area. And I am sure that they went to other revenue collecting areas and came up with loopholes that needed to be clogged. So it wasn't a waste of money, it wasn't a waste of time, and it was a learning experience for people like me who had some level of responsibility in ensuring that the operations are reaping or actually getting funds that the government's supposed to get when service is being done. So we then implemented that procedure, and Harbor Control came a part of it. And they were part of it anyway, but they just came a little more responsible to help us ensure that that money is collected. And so after this enlightenment with the tugboat harbor control situation, I took it upon myself to ensure that the collection of the 4% tax on foreign yacht charter fees was chased up. What did I do? Well, I identified one of the Port Department employees who worked under me, who worked with me, right? At the time, it was Mr. God Stubbs, and may God's soul continue to rest in peace. But God and I got together, and I said to God, I said, look, we need to go to all of these marinas in Nassau and let them send us a text every morning about all the vessels that came to their marina the day before. Because we need to find out, we know that when the yacht charters come in, when the boats come in, they got to go in one of the marinas. And we need to start following up on them paying this 4%. So God, in addition to getting those faxes, would go to the marinas on a daily basis, and he used to use my red plate, go to all the marinas. And this is a job now. To do spot checks. Compare that with the facts that we get. And make sure these marinas are providing us. And once we got that information, I would then compare that with this booklet called a CDI guide back then. I don't know if they still have the CDI guide. I understand they don't. But the CDI guide had the name of every single yacht that were chartering out of Florida. And when I get the name of these vessels calling on the marinas, I will see if they charter. And once you find that vessel, it tells you how much they charter, how much the charter costs, how much people they could carry. Well, usually they don't carry more than 12 people anyway. Excuse me. Whether they can carry scuba equipment, things like that. Because in addition to the 4%, for every person on board that is doing scuba is an additional $50 per person, right? So we want all our money. And I started to chase up those charter, and I got their attention because the marinas started to tell them. The Port Department is checking all charter. They want to know if these charter vessels, and the agents in Florida started to call me up because you know what they was doing back then? A lot of those agents were collecting the 4% when people booked the charter. But they wasn't turning that 4% over to the Port Department. So the boat would come in here with the people, do the charter, and go back to the States, thinking that they paid, because they ain't gonna check to see what the agent doing. But those brokers were sinking that 4%. And they was getting rich. While the Port Department was collecting peanuts for your charters and all kind of charters just began that we didn't even know about. So after I started to do that, the money started coming in like mad. Because now the agent or the broker in the States didn't want some of these vessel yacht owners to find out that they were not submitting that 4% to the Port Department. And we would have been able to tell them because we could charge the ship owner who we give the permit to do the charter. We give them a permit, an annual permit that is good until the 31st December every year. And once we see you had a charter done, we don't see the 4%. We call the owner and ask him what happened. You breaking our rules, and he would then get on the broker and ask them what happened to the 4% that the charter party paid. And then, of course, ain't none of them want to be damn thieves. So they started to really start pushing the money back to the port department. And that was back in 98, 99, eh? So I don't know what happened after that. All I know is when I left, the system crashed. Nobody else was chasing up. Because God retired. And I left. And ain't nobody was doing what me and God was doing. And I ain't trying to big up myself or nothing. I am talking facts. These are facts that happen, and the records are there to show. Because recently, like in recent times, and I say recently, I comparing that with back in the 90s, eh? The government had, I think it was the Minister administration, had appointed some private entity to collect the 4% tax from the foreign charter vessels in the Bahamas. And that private entity, I think, was doing just that. They was collecting the money. And then I think they were supposed to pass on whatever to the Treasury whenever they want to, and this and that. So again, you got a whole port department there. Why you have a private entity collecting government money when you could be using the port department, put enough pressure on the port controller and the deputy port controller and them, and make them do it? I was doing it. Ain't nobody even had to put pressure on me. So we can't let, because the port department is being slack in their responsibility to collect this tax. You need to now bring in a foreign entity, a private entity to do it. No, man, that ain't how government's supposed to run. And I had a problem with that. It ain't my business, but I had a problem with that because I know we could do better, right? And the next step I was about to take was to tie in with the wardens at the land and sea park, because most of these vessels go to the land and sea park. You see, unless you've been in that land and sea park on a yacht, you wouldn't understand the beauty. Excuse me. You wouldn't understand why people paying all this money to be on these ships. But you know, for 1 week, a charter vessel, a 1 week charter is about $1,000 per foot. And when I say $1,000 per foot, if the boat is 70 foot long, that 1 week is like $70,000, $80,000. And we supposed to get 4% of that for every boat that do a charter in the land and sea power anywhere in the Bahamas. We wasn't getting half. We wasn't getting a quarter of what we supposed to get. I can tell you that, right? So I was going to tie in with the warden down there, so they could, because when they doing their patrols, every boat they see, they could write down and they could just text to me what boats they saw in the land and sea park. And again, I could have called on and asked them, we having a problem here, we didn't see the 4%, what's going on? Right? And one thing with those owners is once you start calling them, because they're making money, they could do their due diligence and start to make sure the money coming to the port department where it's supposed to come. But somebody got to chase it up. Somebody got to follow it up. Somebody got to be stern enough to cause them to do what they're supposed to do. Because if they could get away because nobody's checking, now who are you going to blame for that? I don't blame them. So, anyway, really don't want to talk too much about that. But this is just one of the ways. If we had a system of total quality management being done in the port department, this simple area here with this 4% tax, which is now 15% tax, because the government applied VAT. Well, I guess it's 14%. 4 plus 10 is 14 to that tax. And I don't know why government applied VAT to it. That was a bunch of foolishness as far as I was concerned. All you had to do is bring the tax up to 14 or 15% and still call it tax. Because when you start talking about VAT, these boats ain't belong in the Bahamas. These boats are foreign owned. Right? you could tax them because they have to get a permit from your government entity to be able to do charters in the Bahamas. So with that permit comes a fee and a tax for every charter agreement party, just like you was doing. But instead of 4%, now you tax 15%. They can make noise if they want, but they can't be making noise. But, oh, we don't think we should be paying VAT to the Bahamas government and this and that. And I don't blame them how to make that noise too. But anyway, let's move on. Total quality management. Let's look at what that is all about. That means you need to document every single procedure is done in that corporation or entity or department or whatever it is. And you need to audit what is being done. First of all, on a quality basis. And then secondly, an independent or external audit once a year. Just to make sure people are doing what they're supposed to be doing and the system is working the way it's supposed to be working. And one of the things Rusi told us was this was something that Disney just incorporated. The great Disney Corporation. This back in the 90s. And he said, Carnival Shipping adopted it. Not Carnival Shipping, Tropical Shipping adopted this. And since they adopted this, they're not breaking up containers and causing a lot of damage to people, furniture and stuff in those containers, because they started to look at the man in the cruise operating the crane and seeing that he do things based on those procedures and saying that he's not making mistakes to drop containers and back up containers and do that. So they start saving a lot of money because they get sued every time they damage people's things. Saving a lot of money. And these are the things that the world saw as a win-win with this quality procedure. And again, it ain't too late to put that in government. It ain't too late to put that in no organization. And we look at total quality in the maritime sectors of the Bahamas. The BMA, for example. Ladies and gentlemen, I'm talking. I need somebody to call. The number to call me is 326-8255. I ain't giving you too much with quality for me, eh? But you all may know about some systems that ain't in place. And some of these other areas too. Or some that are in place and working out very well. We need to improve our public service. You see the big scandal we got going on now? I would say that if we had a quality management system throughout our forces, our armed forces, police and defense force, immigration, because we got problems in this country. But if we had quality management systems where these areas are being audited on a quality basis by people who work in those organizations who can audit, and then independently by an auditing structure that knows how to come and do audits, that things will improve tremendously and loopholes will be clogged, right? Because, and as the saying goes, who's policing the police? Somebody need to look in. And when defense force vessels go out to sea, what policy procedures they have written for these captains and engineers to abide by to ensure that the risks are minimized from causing an engine to run away, causing a navigator to make a wrong move and cause the ship to run aground, causing, if you have systems in place that audits these things, mistakes will be minimized. Monies would be saved. Because every time something goes wrong with one of those ships, it's a big cost. They ships just like every other ships. Shipping is an expensive thing to deal with when ships are running aground or having collisions or engines are not being managed properly and you got to change big parts on engines. That's a big cost that no shipping company needs, eh? So, defense force, police, look at the police vehicles. How often are one of them required to patrol? What area? What is the procedure for this police station as far as patrolling is concerned in the community, walking is concerned in the community, and what areas they got to be? Do they have areas where they could electronically engage something and say, we were here, we were here, we were here. GPS is in all kind of vehicles. Are those GPS in those police patrol cars? And is somebody checking on a shift-by-shift basis or a day-by-day basis the records of those electronic systems or those GPS to see where these vehicles were, where they were not, were they meeting the mandate that is stipulated, the procedures that they're supposed to be in certain places at certain times. These are simple things that can cause reduction in slackness once the follow-up is being done. But of course, the procedures got to be written out first. The audit's got to be done. And once you know these things can happen, you ain't got the luxury to sit and say, man, we ain't need to go on. We ain't nobody called. We ain't got no patrol tonight. I might do one, but I ain't got a patrol no every 2 hours. And I mean, I don't know. I'm not a police. I'm sure that you have a lot of good fellas who can go there and want to do the job. But you got slack people. They come from our homes. We got slackness in home too. So I'm just saying, let's get some quality in our government that will alleviate a lot of the frustrations that we are experiencing as a result of not having the quality systems in place. We need the Bahamas Maritime Authority, for example, to introduce a quality system for everything they do in there, every license they issue, every inspection they receive, every class audit or survey that was done. So that the people who are dealing with these things don't have the luxury to ignore some of it or get slack on it. But like most other improvement justice, we had Mr. Van Leshan, I can't remember, Van Dan Leshan, I don't remember his name, but he and I were close, and he was brought into the BMA. Just the primary reason he was brought in is to introduce a quality management system within the BMA. Yes, he produced all the procedure manuals. Documentation go on the bed. It just sit on the director's desk and caught dust. Just like how a lot of other things sit on the desk and catch dust when departments and ministries are supposed to make sure these things are incorporated and these guidance are utilized, right? Just a pity. They're supposed to, once they put this system in place, the entire Merchant Shipping Act and everything that they are obligated to do under the Merchant Shipping Act would be a part of those procedures. So they will have to issue the local safety certificate or cause it to be issued and manage it to the extent where they ensure that the domestic fleet that is non-SOLAS is being taken care of by way of surveys to issue this local safety certificate. Excuse me. They would ensure that the people driving these vessels domestically have the relevant STCW certification as captain and engineer on board. And not just the A or B license thinking they could go in. No, you're also required to have that STCW license as a master under 500 tons. Master near coastal up to 3,000 tons. These things are required. The Port Department don't deal with that because that don't come under the Port Department. That come under the Merchant Shipping Act. And if somebody was to carefully put something together based on the requirements of the BMA, that will be in place today. But the fact that it's not in place, or the fact that they don't have to have audits, they don't have procedure manual for these things, it ain't happening. Licenses issued to Bahamas. Let me tell you something. When I was in the BMA, I found out that, well, I found it even before I joined the BMA because I did some training courses, right? And if you are a country that is going to issue a license, an international license for people to serve on ships, you have an obligation that whoever is providing the training by which the license will be issued Your entity, the BMA, is supposed to go to that institution on a quarterly basis. Well, at least once a year, as an independent auditor, an audit to make sure that the licenses that they're issuing for the people you actually giving licenses to, their training is totally in line with what the STCW require, what the Merchant Shipping Act require, and what any bulletins or whatever the BMA may be issuing require. And that's a task that the BMA didn't want to do, because you now got to pay somebody to go do those audits, right? From the BMA. And that's money you could save. The BMA wasn't really particularly interested in spending money on dealing with local matters within the Bahamas, because you remember their head office in London. They just wanted to say, let them make do. And so, they didn't even want to be issuing licenses to Bahamians. What they are set up to do, and what they do very well, is what you call endorsements of licenses. In other words, people who have a license already, if they want to serve on a BMA ship or Bahamas Maritime or Bahamas flagship, they will endorse that license based on particular procedures. That not what they have, but what the STCW have in place. And they will endorse those licenses. But issuing a license called for other things that the BMA didn't even want to put in place, because that's extra work, extra money, extra bringing somebody to pay, and they didn't want to do it. But eventually we got something going where they realized they had to issue licenses to Bahamians, because you can't expect the Bahamian to go to another country and get a license for you to endorse. Well, I shouldn't say you can't, because some Bahamians had to do that. But anyway, the actual quarterly and annual audits and the procedures manuals would have ensured that these things were stamped out, Things that the Port Department could do if they implement a quality management system. They would have to document procedures for ships using Porter's Key on a daily basis. And they would have to carry it out, because they're going to be audited every month, every 3 months. And they're going to be audited every year by an outside entity. So they wouldn't have the luxury to allow ships to come and tie up at Porter's Key Dock wherever they want to. Because according to the Port Authorities Act, if a ship is inoperative, if a ship is not working, it shouldn't even be the Porter's Key Dock. And if a ship is there but it's not working at the time, and another ship needs to come into the dock to work, that ship is required to move so that ship could come in and work. So all of these bunch of vessels, delinquent vessels that sit on Porter's Key Dock for years and years and don't move, and sometimes they end up sinking. None of that will be happening at Porter's Key if they implement a quality management system where they have procedures, daily procedures, weekly procedures for ensuring that every dock space or slip is accounted for. We know what ships using it. They allowing ships to sit there and they ain't moving for weeks or days, right? Every time someone use our water, we collecting that, because we controlling that. We have a meter on that, and every day we get read those meters, yada yada. Man, we used to do that back in the day, I can tell you. I don't know if it's still happening. The daily billings for storing containers. Anybody who have a container on the dock, they're supposed to be paying for that. As a matter of fact, they even ain't supposed to be allowed to do that unless they get permission from the Port Department. But it's everybody happy-go-lucky now. Everybody doing what they want to do in the Port Department. I don't think even collecting no money for those containers. They're just sitting on the dock until the people are ready to move them. And now the dock is getting so congested that it look like you got buildings on the dock. Those containers so big now and heights up so high. And the Port Department have absolutely no control. Otherwise, they wouldn't be there, So we need to do something with that. And that's basically where we need to go with quality at Porter's Key Dock. When you're issuing the license for the A or B, you need to have procedures for that. certain things they have to do. You need to check wherever they're doing their courses to make sure they're doing things properly, make sure they're doing proper exams, keeping them filed, and you go out and you challenge them. Let me see this file for this person who got the license 2 years ago. They should be able to produce it. Let me see the exam that he did. They're things that would strengthen the system. Because, some people, they could get a certificate from somewhere. They ain't never take no exam. They ain't never gone to no class. Well, of course, we know we're a corrupt society. So we need procedures in place. And we need to follow up with those audits to do spot checks and ensure. And once people see that, they can take the rest. But if they don't see that, you think they can check? I don't think so. Again, ladies and gentlemen, you listen to Maritime Matters. Boy, I got to stop every here and there. Eh? I am Captain Glenn Bain, and we are basically talking about quality management systems in maritime. Total quality management generally, but particularly in maritime. We just talk about the BMA, we just talk about the Port Department, and that's basically maritime, right? Now we can move to renewable energy in the Bahamas. And we were talking about this last week for a while. And I know we got a lot of people out there who have solar panels on their roof that is tied in with an inverter on their power wall along with batteries that they have to spend plenty of money for. Why don't one of y'all call in and let us know that you would like to be tied into the grid so that when you're making all this energy for your place, you could get some of that money you spend for these equipment back by feeding that to the grid for someone else to use. That you can now tie into the grid, without having to buy batteries, because your excess energy that are being made when the sun is hot is reversing your meter so it can feed back to the grid that energy that you don't need at the time. That the government wouldn't need a humongous amount or number of solar panels because they can use all of our roof or rooftop and our own panels and just allow us to tie into the power grid so that they don't even have to come up with the money for half of the power that will be provided in this country. They can never have to come up with it, but they can benefit because when we feed the grid and they take power from our solar generation, they will pay us a couple dollars for it, and when they sell it to somebody who need it that ain't generating enough power or they don't put up their own solar panels, they charge them more. So the company is making a lot of money just by us helping and giving them power that they don't even need to produce. Why would Exoma become solarized over 80%, but not New Providence and not Grand Bahama? What is BPL projecting for the year 2030? Because the country is required to reduce its energy down to 70%. So we need to get rid of 30% of energy being derived from fossil fuel. What is BPL doing to say that by 2030, we would have replaced that fossil fuel emissions of carbon with renewable energy? And in our case, solar. We don't need wind farms here in the Bahamas if solar is so readily available. And even if we bring in wind farms, we could win big off them. What is Grand Bahama Power Company? Now I know they put up one or two small, I'll call them relatively small, like 5 to 6 megawatts of solar in Grand Bahama. They got solar farms producing between 5 and 10 megawatts, right? And all they're doing is feeding that to the grid, which is good. Because now Grand Bahama Power Company is receiving energy that they ain't paying for, that they can now sell, because of course they can pay as much as they can sell it for. They could sell to consumers in Grand Bahama. And how much of that we get in Nassau, where we have private entities building solar farms to feed BPL grid. Now, we heard that in the harbor, the Nassau Cruise Port wants to put out enough solar power to supply its operations. And then on the flip side of that, they say they want to supply the ships when they come to plug in. We want to supply those ships with energy from natural gas. How conflicting is that? What about putting a solar farm in place to send power to those ships? You could use all the roof space you got within Nassau Harbor or Nassau Container Port, and extra space at Arawaki to supply that Prince George Wharf, Nassau Cruise Port area with enough power for those cruise ships to plug in. And you don't have to be using natural gas, which emits carbon. So why go to that? 326-825. If you know, please call and tell me, because I cannot make sense out of it. So, we down to 7 minutes. That can't be true. Producer, we down to 7 minutes. Okay, and nobody want to call, but nobody like Robert Soleil. Or you all just don't want to. What happened? Some of y'all got solar in your house now. Come on, call them and know what's happening, man. We want to have renewable energy and shipping. Internationally now, I'll just throw out some things before our time run out on us. We be down to minutes. We down to, 6 minutes, right? They got, right now, what you call a floating nuclear power plant. In other words, you know most nuclear power plants are land-based and fixed. And the world is now utilizing nuclear power plants to provide over 10% of the world's energy. So 10% of the world's energy is plenty energy. The Bahamas alone, we don't even provide 0.1% of the world's energy. So 10% is quite a lot, and that is all done by nuclear power. And nuclear power is going to increase as we move towards net zero for 2040, 2050. So they'll have more nuclear that can be commercially used to supply power. And now this one is saying they got a floating one, so that I guess ships could plug into it for energy or whatever the case may be. But I don't think we want to talk about no nuclear plant in the Bahamas, because we got sun. We don't need nuclear. Nuclear dangerous, because if you have a nuclear leak, people die. That's the problem with nuclear, right? But they're just letting you know that they're making them floating now to go all over the place, worldwide. And they also got on a lot of large ships, particularly bulk carriers. That has a lot of room at the top, right? Because bulk carriers carry coffee grains, sand, rock, orange juice, diesel, gas, propane, whatever they carry in the hull of the ship. So on top of the deck, they get rotor sails. They got these tall posts with a sail that they can roll out electronically. And whenever they have the wind on the side of them or behind them or whatever the case may be, they roll out those sails. and the ship picks up more speed because the wind helping it. And they're doing this on a lot of ships now. They're actually doing this on a giant iron ore carrier. You know what iron ore is? The cubes of iron that they take from certain countries to the next country for them to burn and make things, right? You know, iron make all kind of things. You build in your house, you need columns. You can put steel in them columns. That come from iron ore. They make those up, right? So they got the ships that carrying iron ore around the world with 4 and 5 big rotor sails, just to help so that I could put less carbon in the air for making those voyages. Maersk, which is, I think, the largest container ship line in the world, or they're one of the largest 3. But I think they're the largest, right? They are actually building a series of methanol ships that run, the engine run of methanol. Oh, we got 3 minutes? Wow. And those ships are going to be dual. Either they could also, because methanol is not so readily available at this moment, they could also carry natural gas or run off natural gas. And they can start with natural gas, and as methanol become more available, they cut the natural gas out and run strictly off methanol. Okay? Then they got some carriers that they carrying ammonia, and they're using ammonia to run the engine. But they're also bunkering other ships. In other words, ships that have their engine fitted to run off ammonia, they can just go alongside that ship and fill their tanks with ammonia. And these are big ships going around the world doing this. So I don't want for 1 second some people to be thinking that this thing is a farce as far as carbon zero or net zero by 2040, 2050, because ships are doing these things already. And we can get to talk about the easy car sales versus the EV motors, right? So that's the last thing we'll mention is the deep sea mining to compete with China. The US realizes that in this shift of carbon releasing fuels, as we call them, fossil fuels, that China is selling most products to cause the world to wean itself off of fossil fuel. But they realize too that the raw material to make this stuff is found in an abundance in China. And what they recently discovered is by going into the sea and digging deep enough in certain areas, particularly in the Pacific Ocean areas, they can find a lot of this mineral and whatnot to compete with China. They don't have to import these things from China to make EVs, to make windmill blades and windmills, to make solar panels and that type of thing, right? And batteries, solar batteries for solar setup. They can dig in certain areas and find some of the stuff and make the stuff locally in the US. And as you know, Mr. Trump coming in January saying that America's going back to drilling oil. You can drill, baby, drill. I mean, they ain't stop. But they're going to drill it crazy now. Although his time will be finished before 2030, and whoever comes in 2029, January, will have the headache of saying to the world, well, you know, we pledged that we were going to reduce our fossil fuel use down to 70% by 2030, But, you know, Mr. Trump had his own thing going on, so we can see what we can do over the next year. But while the rest of the world is doing it, the U.S. is also doing it. But we know that Mr. Trump said he can poke the fire, right? He can do some things that is not moving toward net zero 2030, 2040, but he can only do it for 4 years. Because if America is left behind, the rest of the world could still be weaning itself off of fossil fuel. So time gone. Ladies and gentlemen, I'm fresh out of time, but let me just finish the statement. So the natural gas, and America is now getting big in shipping out natural gas to Europe. That natural gas that they want to ship out, Europe ain't really need it no more, because Europe is going to have a lot of windmills that they ain't going to need the fossil fuel. So that ain't going to work out too well in the long run. Anyway, ladies and gentlemen, I guess we was born tonight. I don't know, because nobody called in. I don't know if y'all were just mesmerized with the information. That'd be nice to know. But our show is wrapped up. 1 hour and 35 minutes is gone. You have been listening to Maritime Matters. My producer for the night, Mr. Craig Gibson, all the way through. Our sponsors again are Bahamas Maritime Connection Limited and Island Care Pharmacies in Freeport, and of course 101 Pharmacy in Nassau. And with that, ladies and gentlemen, we look forward to seeing you next week, or talking to you next week. We get at least one call. We'll go back to talk about some things that you all like to call about, right? I am Captain Glenn Bain, and you have been listening to Maritime Matters.
I left my